Hey
Again,
Mo.
yeah. Hey, Sheena, how's it going?
Good, good. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being on PMM Perspectives. I am very excited about our chat today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Why don't you just kick us off with where you're located, a little bit about your background, and then we can dive into some of these questions.
Okay, so very quickly, my name is Mo. I am a marketing advisor. So I work across product marketing, content marketing, and growth marketing, especially on the paid ads perspective. I'm currently based in the UK, in Liverpool. It's summer here, so it's pretty
Nice.
beautiful. And I'm so glad to be here speaking to the Olivine team about all things PMM.
Awesome. Yeah. And Mo actually has helped us for a while with different pieces of long form content. He's contributed a lot in the past. So this is an exciting conversation. Obviously, you contributed to the cookbook as well, which is part of the reason why you're here today. So, one of the first questions that we like to ask is what sort of tips would you give a new PMM in a new role in the first 30, 60, and 90 days? And alongside that, what I want to ask is, obviously we know a lot of people are looking for work right now. It's been really tough for a lot of folks. And so, you know, would love to hear about new role stuff, any tips that you have there, but also ways to stand out as a product marketer in this very, very competitive market. So, two questions there, but anything that you could offer.
Yeah. So I guess what we can do is we can start with the getting the job first and
Yep.
then what to do once you get the job.
Perfect.
Yeah, as we
Yep.
were talking about just now, it's the market is pretty tough for everyone. And I think if you're a PMM, one of the things that you can do is try and develop those core skills and gain hands-on experience because that's going to show up in all the things that you do, the content that you
Mm-hmm.
create to try and attract recruiters, the stuff that you put on your resume, and what you can offer these companies and the types of jobs that you can apply for. So I think trying to get that hands-on experience, if there's internships, assuming you're like a more junior PMM, if there's side projects that you've been working on that you can, try and apply PMM principles to those real world scenarios, if you can build skills in market research, data analysis, communication, project management, all of this stuff is really going to help. But I think probably the biggest thing that you can do for your PMM career is joining and engaging in the community of
I love
other
that.
PMMs. Yeah. So try as much as possible to connect with other PMMs, other industry professionals. There's lots of events, there's webinars, there's podcasts, there's Slack communities, the PMM Slack community, the one that's being run by Richard King and the rest of the PMM crew. I think definitely join that. There's thousands of other PMMs in there and they share lots of tips, resources, and
That's awesome.
jobs too. Yeah. So definitely network, I think, as much as possible, and then try and learn continuously. So PMM is such a fast changing industry, such a fast changing role. And there's lots of new trends that you need to be aware of. There's lots of tools that you might want to try out, lots of best practices or courses, blogs, books, anything that you can do. It's very important for you to be like a sponge and just absorb as much information as possible.
I
So
love that. Yeah, just to note some stuff that you said. I think the fact that this is such an evolving role, which you mentioned, is really important because I've seen, I've been working with Olivine for 4 years, but 4 years ago when I was in-house before I joined Olivine, things have changed so much in the PMM role and across different companies. We talked about this in another episode. A PMM role is different, depending on if you're at an enterprise company or if you're at a scrappy startup, like things change, your role changes. So just absorbing, like you said, is so important.
yeah. And that's the other thing too, that most people think PMM is sort of like a one size fits all. But when you, especially when you join these communities and you look at the types of jobs that are posted and the way they're posted, there's so many different flavors of PMMs because there's so many different flavors of companies. And what works, say for example, at an early stage company isn't going to work at an enterprise company that's targeting, let's say, Fortune 100 clients, right?
Totally.
So knowing where you fit in best is probably also going to do a lot for helping you find the right role. There's some people who wants to be on the ground floor building a startup and getting really into the weeds, right? And then there are others who prefer to come in when a foundation has already been laid. So what type of role do you enjoy best? And then how can you build the skills around that? So that's the building the skills. And then if you want to stand out in the job market, which as we've already said is pretty tough right now, I think visibility is probably your biggest advantage here, right? So try and showcase your work as much as possible. A
Oh,
portfolio is the simplest thing that you can do as a PMM. Just a list of things you've done, what you've learned, ideally things you've written, maybe videos you've made, any tutorials you've created, any appearances you've had on podcasts such as this. So showcase your work, because it's tempting to think that your work is going to speak for you, but unfortunately, you still have to speak for your work before it gets to that point. Yeah.
yeah, that's a
So
great tip. Great tip.
yeah,
I'm like, I create a portfolio, Sheena. Like,
yeah,
can I have some, but like just a folder. Here's everything I've ever
yeah,
done. I've actually heard
yeah,
that from friends before too. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And that actually, maybe not everything you've ever done, but like the top things that you've done,
totally.
because you also don't want to overwhelm people.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. So definitely portfolios, your achievements and case studies, the impact as well of your work. So it's one thing to say, I worked on a company's email flows, but then what did that accomplish? Did we
totally.
get more conversions from that? Did the
Mm-hmm.
open rate go up? Things like that. And social media is also like a great way for you to put yourself out there. I think LinkedIn is the easiest platform for you to get on if you're a PMM. Try and show up as much as possible. Maybe not every day, because sometimes you just don't have the inspiration for that. But there's different tools today that can help you create a content plan to help you show up every day, to talk about what it is you've done, how you see the industry changing, your favorite companies and what they're
Yay.
doing. Something as simple as just documenting great examples of product marketing that you see in the wild. That's a content strategy right there. And just publishing that shows anybody else who's looking for PMM that, hey, this person is tapped in and we should probably speak to them. So social media visibility is a big thing. Tailoring your resume, I think keep it simple. When we talk about CV design, there's a tendency to want to overcomplicate things and get like really fancy with fonts and colors and things like that. But it's really just keep it very simple. And remember that a lot of the times your CV is going to go through an ATS system. So if you don't get through that ATS system, which is looking for specific keywords, then you've already lost the game, right? So tailoring your resume and then try and prepare for interviews. There's lots of common PMM interview questions that you can find online, and you can sort of practice on them and try and figure out how to answer them and how they apply to your job experience. And as much as possible, seek mentors. I think mentors and sponsors and champions are people you want to have in your corner, because they're going to speak for you in the rooms that you are not in or you can't get into.
That's great. Really, really great advice. And then, let's say you land a job. What are some tips for those first 30, 60, 90 days?
Yeah. So anybody who hasn't already checked out the 30 PMM cookbook, I think they should definitely check it out. I don't want to spoil too much of it, but it goes into depth and detail about what to do in the first 30, 60, 90 days. But I think the basics of it is in the first 30 days, it's all about learning, right? You're trying to understand the company, you want to understand the product, mission, vision, offerings, market position, growth model, growth stage, funding level, right? You want to meet a lot of stakeholders. So your first 30 days is probably going to involve a lot of one-on-one meetings with people in product, people in sales, your marketing colleagues, people in customer success. You're trying to understand everyone's goals and pain points. And then you're going to be doing quite a lot of market research. So you want to understand who the competitors are. What are some of the market trends that are going to determine whether or not you win in the space? What is the current customer feedback? You want to get a comprehensive view, really the landscape that you're going to be working in. And so that's outside, but you also want to learn internal processes. So what are the company's tools? What do we use? Are we using Asana? Are we using Monday? Are we using ClickUp? Right? What are the workflows? If we want to get a new landing page design, what's the process for that internally? Because if you don't understand that, you're going to hit a lot of roadblocks when you're trying to make changes down the line. And then what are the reporting structures? Who reports to who? What are the power plays? Or what are the internal politics? Because these things are also going to, for better or worse, affect how much of an impact you can make. So that's the first 30 days. Just again, sponge, just absorb as much. And then the next 30 days for between days 31 and day 60, you're going to be doing audits, right? So you want to audit any existing materials. So current marketing assets, the website, campaigns, metrics, landing page, email flows. What you're trying to do here is identify where the gaps, where the opportunities, what's currently working, and then what can we quickly fix for a quick win, and then what are we probably going to need to plan a bit more long term for, and then aligning on goals. So this is where your objectives, your KPIs, your OKRs really come in. You want to be speaking to your manager and your team. You want everyone on the same page as to what are we trying to accomplish? What's the goal here? How are we going to measure our work? What does success look like? And then trying to do a few quick win projects. And I love the
Yeah,
PMM
that's
cookbook
great.
because it goes into a bit more detail on this. We talk about one large project and two small projects. I think momentum is very important, especially as a PMM, because a lot of our work happens in the background. And it's hard for people to see the impact of our work unless we're communicating this. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. That comes in the next 30 days. So you are auditing existing materials, you're aligning on goals, and you're identifying some quick win projects just to build that momentum. And then for the last 30 days, so from day 61 to day 90, this is now execution and iteration. You're implementing that plan. You are adapting based on feedback. So, for example, you're revamping landing pages. You're looking at email flows. You're setting up exit surveys, right? You're trying to understand what's going on in the mind of customers who are choosing not to sign up or not to continue using your product. And then you're measuring impact here. So this is when reporting begins to come in. You've had 90 days now to do something for us to start getting some early results. What do those look like? Are we seeing slightly more conversion rates based on that landing page revamp we did? Are we getting some more qualitative feedback from customer surveys? Are we beginning to see some defined segments based on our positioning? So you're going to be tracking progress and adjusting your strategy as needed. And then probably the most important bit is, and you should be doing this throughout, but ideally by the last 90 days, you should be communicating wins as
I love
much as
that.
possible.
And that, you said that earlier too, and showcasing your work, you actually have to, take the steps to share what you've accomplished because, to your point, people won't always see it.
They won't see it. And this is coming slightly from experience, especially from the content marketing side, where you're doing all this work, the SEO plan is it's kicking into high gear, you're getting a lot of traffic, but nobody cares about your work as much as you do. And it's super crucial that you advocate for yourself and advocate for the work that you're doing and advocate for the results that you're getting. Because otherwise, you're going to get to a point where, 6 months, 12 months have passed, and then everyone goes, in the middle of a performance review, and they go, okay, so what have you done this past year? And you're thinking, well, I mean, aren't you seeing the content going out? Aren't you seeing the landing pages getting revamped? We're getting all these results, but they don't see it because they're focused on their work. You are the only person who cares about your work as much as you do, so you have to advocate for yourself. And, this now goes into like psychological aspects because some people maybe struggle with speaking up for themselves. Maybe they struggle with feelings of self-worth or self-esteem. And so in the workplace, they tend to become muted. And that affects the impact that they're able to make and the longevity of their career at that particular company. So speaking up for yourself is it's just a good thing, a good skill to have in general, a life skill. But then it's super important especially from a PMM perspective. So that's 30, 60, 90 days. Understanding, learning, absorbing, auditing, and then execution.
How would you, thank you for all that. How would you suggest communicating these results? Is it to your manager? Is it to the wider team? Like in your experience, how have you done that?
Yeah. So one of the easiest ways of seeing results being communicated is just in the company Slack group. Everyone is there.
Yeah.
Right. There's usually some sort of an announcement or general channel that everyone has to be in. And people it's very important to understand that people want to work for a company that is winning. Right. So when you're communicating your wins, you're literally making everybody feel a bit more confident about their choice in working for that company. Right. So it is literally in everyone's best interest to communicate their wins as much as possible. And it can be a tiny thing, right? It can be like, we just published a new podcast episode that we did with Mo and Sheena. And they spoke about this and it got 20 comments from VPs on LinkedIn. So now everybody feels good about that. They go and check out the episode, they share it as well on their LinkedIn. And just like that, you've not only communicated wins, but you've just co-opted the entire company into helping to distribute the content. Okay.
Totally.
So that's the first. And then, so Slack groups, and then in one-on-ones as well, because again, your boss has a lot of things that they're working on. They're not always going to be focused on what it is that you're doing. They're expecting you to obviously take the lead, your projects. So that one-on-one, I think, is a great opportunity for you to talk about what it is that you're doing, communicating those wins. And then if there's an internal email newsletter, feel free to bring up some of the things that you and your team have done. If there's a town hall, I've seen examples where, different departments will prepare presentations where everyone wins within a department. And that's always a great way to communicate these wins to the wider company.
I love it. Yeah. And I think starting with that Slack communication for somebody who might not be as comfortable speaking up, that's a great first step, and then it's like, okay, I communicated it here. Maybe now I could take it to the next level and present it in all hands, to your point. So I really like that.
Before
Awesome.
we move on, how does it currently work at Olivine?
We're a Slack. Everybody communicates in Slack. So that's how we do it. Everything's communicated in Slack. And we have a kudos channel. So anytime there's a win, we share about it there. We give people a lot of credit there for any work that they've done. People share about accounts that we've either brought in or, have seen a lot of success in. So exactly what you were sharing. We used to have an all hands. We might bring it back, but we're such a small team that, it makes a lot of sense to stick to Slack communication, and that works well for us. But yeah, Slack is fun. Emojis, it really like ramps up the celebration. So yeah, I think that's a great tip.
Awesome.
Okay, so moving into your chapter for the PMM cookbook, you talk a lot about the anatomy of a product marketing team. Do you want to break down some of those different functions, how they work together, why it's important?
Sure. So the anatomy of a marketing team, you're going to have these different sort of roles and functions, right? And right at the top, and what I believe should always be the first role that is hired for is product marketing. I think product marketing sets the foundation for the startup's marketing success specifically. So product marketing, they're focused on product positioning, they work on messaging, go-to-market strategies, anything to drive product adoption and revenue. They're looking at competitors. How do we compare against them? And I think it's very important for communicating the startup's value and the product's value, especially in the early days, but also throughout the life of the startup. So that's product marketing. And then you've got growth marketing. They're usually responsible for user acquisition, retention, growth, and they're very data driven. So I call them the experimenters, the testers, the mad scientists. They're looking at how can we squeeze out every last, conversion. How can we make that graph go up and to the right? And growth marketing is really great for that because they don't really have they have a no holds barred mentality, right? Within reason, of course. They're trying to look at how we can win, even if the way we can win is something our competitors are not trying, but the data shows that we should definitely double down on this, right? So data-driven growth, campaign optimization, that's what growth marketing is doing. And then content marketing, they're about creating and distributing valuable content. Their role is to attract, engage, convert, target audience. They are almost like the storytellers, the promoters. They're trying to bring people in, solve their problems, show that the company is capable, incredible, and an authority in the space, and then try and influence the sale or drive them towards a conversion. So that's what content marketing does. And then design is about developing the visual assets, the user experiences, anything that supports marketing campaigns and product interfaces. I think design, especially in the early days, can be overlooked, but I think it's a very important role because good design can mean the difference between conversion or someone going, this company doesn't seem like it understands what it is that I want to do. And if there is friction on the landing page, if there's friction on the sign up, on the onboarding, and design wasn't part of that, then that friction is going to cost you a lot in sales, and you won't even know why your conversions aren't rising. It's just because it's just bad design. So good design is good for business. And then you've got public relations. So sometimes marketing team, you've got PR, and this can be internal, sometimes it's external, but they're more managing the company's public image and media relations, and they're building brand awareness, credibility. And I think they're especially important towards the later stages of growth when PR becomes a lot more crucial. But even in the beginning, when you're trying to, for example, raise funding, PR can play a really big role in getting that visibility that you need. That's PR. And then events, they're planning and executing events, they're doing conferences, webinars, anything to engage prospects and customers, and potentially investors and the press, and to generate those leads. So they all work together, obviously. It's
Yeah.
very important for there to be that sort of cross-functional collaboration. And there's different ways you can do that. Regular communication is the first thing that we would recommend. So holding these regular meetings, or if you prefer async communication, then having sort of a shared Slack group where everyone can come and share anything that they're
Marketing
working on.
channel.
Yeah, like a marketing channel. That's usually very common in a lot of startups. And then having a shared objective. I think everyone having a common KPI they're working towards, not having disparate KPIs that incentivize divided behavior.
That's
So
such a good point.
so like we've seen, where marketing is only responsible for leads, and they just want to fill the lead funnel, and then maybe sales is looking at how many of these have actually closed and how much revenue we've gotten. But because the leads are not great quality, right? Sales suffers, for example,
Right.
and if they're speaking different languages. So it's very important for everybody to be aligned, and especially within the marketing team too. And then transparency, I think, is also very important. So, what sort of project management tools? How are we getting everyone to see what everyone is working on, so that we know what is being prioritized this week, this month, this quarter, this year, right? So, if you use Asana, for example, then it's very easy to see that Sheena is working on this, and maybe Anna is working on this, and Mo is working on this, and this is how far along they've gotten. So that project visibility is very important to ongoing projects and timelines. And then having some sort of a feedback loop, right? So you have all these people, they're great, they're doing their job, they're working on the marketing for the company. How are they giving or feeding, feedback back into the process? So if Sheena sees something on the product marketing side, how is she able to translate that observation and share it with the rest of the team, so that we can then adjust our strategy? Otherwise, everyone is working in silos. And as we already know, silos are a terrible way to run any team,
So
but especially.
totally. I think this is a perhaps undervalued point, cross collaboration, or people think that they have it, but they really don't. And we see that all the time in the workshops that we put on. So we'll bring these different teams together for a workshop, and you'll see how even at these companies that are so well established, they're completely missing alignment internally. Like even from the most basic thing as a persona, like some people think like, oh, this is who we're marketing towards. Sales is talking to somebody else. Copywriters are writing something totally different than, who product marketing is actually reaching for. So it's very interesting how I think with something like cross collaboration or transparency or anything that, is around that point, it has to be consistent. You kind of always have to come back to it. You have to make sure that this is something that you're, leaning on day to day. It's not like a once a quarter thing or, once a week thing. Like you really have to, it has to become part of your daily behavior to be cross collaborative.
Yeah. And you make a great point there, because when teams aren't working together on marketing, in this case, because that's what we're talking about, you find it difficult to get answers to very basic questions. So, for example, I've consulted with teams where you ask them, so what is your conversion rate? And nobody has any idea, right?
Right.
Not marketing, not sales. What is your click-through rate? How many people do we have in the email list? Are they segmented? They know the basic stuff like who's our top competitor, but when you drill down to it and you're like, oh, so if we want to run, let's say, a paid ads campaign, what is the benchmark cost per click we can expect? And nobody has it yet, because nobody's talking to anyone
You're
else.
not
No
talking
one's
to each
looking at the
other.
systems. There's no central dashboard, right? So I think cross collaboration goes beyond just helping us work on the same strategy and work towards the same goal. It also allows us to have the same data, so that when we bring on an external consultant, when we work with an agency like Olivine, when we are we're speaking to VCs because we want to raise our next round, and they ask us these very basic questions, everybody has the same answer.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I want to switch gears into content marketing, because obviously you have a lot of experience with consulting around content marketing. What do you think about creating a content marketing strategy that actually aligns with product marketing goals?
Yeah. So I think those product goals that you just mentioned, they're super important. Your content strategy supports product marketing objectives, right? Not
Totally.
the other way around. So if you've got a year with planned product launches, you've got feature updates, you need to educate the customer in certain aspects, then your content needs to support all of that. So aligning with those product goals. If you don't have goals, one of the most frustrating things, especially if you're consulting in content marketing, is walking into an engagement and the team has no idea really what they're trying to accomplish. They've got like a big fuzzy goal, but it's not broken down into parts. And then you're spending your time doing a lot of this foundational work rather than diving into the content. So I think it's very important for the marketing teams to know what they're trying to accomplish so that when you bring in anybody external, they know where they fit into that system. So product goals, and then audience research. Who are we speaking to? What are their needs? What are their pain points? What are their preferences as well? And that then allows you to tailor your content to that and make sure that it resonates with where in the customer journey your prospects are, because you don't want to dive in and you're writing content that really is misaligned with where they are. Maybe you're writing bottom of funnel content talking about how to buy this thing, but you're a new category and nobody knows about your product. They don't even know how it can bring value. So you need to be here creating content and then move them across that funnel. And then creating content pillars. So again, things that align with your product's value proposition, the customer journey stage, and most importantly, your point of view. There are a ton of companies out there that don't have a defined point of view. You could take their website landing page, block out the logo and the name, and you wouldn't know which company you're actually reading about because they're so cookie cutter. They blend in with everyone else. So what's your point of view? Does your team have strong opinions about the product in the industry and the future of that industry that you're in? Does your founder have a strong point of view? What do they believe? What's the hill they're willing to quote unquote die on? Right? Because when you have that strong point of view, it's going to show up in the content. And when you write content, you could write content with fire, man. Fire, content that's going to be remembered, that's going to stick. So content pillars, and then analyzing what it is that you're writing about. It's all well and good to write content, but then how is it performing? Are we getting the traffic that we're looking for? Is it good traffic? Is it coming from the right places? Are we converting the right type of people? And it's not just enough to say we're converting people. Are those people then staying? Because we've seen situations where you're getting a lot of conversions, but there's high churn. So they're coming in, but they're moving out just as fast. And everyone thinks content is working, but it's actually not working because the type of customers we're bringing in maybe are not a good fit for the company.
Right.
So
Totally.
alignment on our ICP is very important here.
Awesome. And in your chapter, and I think this is one of my favorite things, you talk about storytelling and just the importance of storytelling. And I think, we know that across the board. That's how so many humans actually receive information and remember things, is through a story. That's how we communicate. So what are some tips that you have for product marketers to actually create compelling narratives in the work that they're doing?
Yeah. So creating compelling narratives really comes down to who is the customer here and how can we make them the hero of the story?
I love it.
When you talk about, so when you talk about how your product is solving problems for them, what problems were they facing? What are the obstacles they faced? What were the alternatives they were considering? And then how did your product come in and best all those alternatives to give them the nirvana they were looking for? Resolution, looking at the story arc. So case studies, testimonials, people love reading about other people like them who are winning with your product. So when you get customer centric, I think that can really, really help. Having a clear value proposition as well. So highlighting the unique benefits, differentiators of your product, using simple, compelling language. I think it's easier that way. Tie your value proposition back to the jobs to be done for your customer. Try and appeal emotionally using these storytelling techniques. So when you think about the customer that you're dealing with and the product that you're trying to sell, there's usually an emotion associated with it, right? And this could be anger, it could be frustration, it could be fear. They could be, be afraid of relegation. Maybe they're losing in their industry. How can you tap into that emotion with your content, with your landing page copy, with the emails that you're sending out, with the way you frame your value prop, right? So emotional appeal is very important. And then trying to stay consistent as well throughout all your channels and touch points, because you want to reinforce that narrative that you're telling to your customers. So the
Great.
rest, I want people to check out the PMM cookbook and read
Yeah,
that.
awesome. Thank you so much. And so I think, where we could wrap up here is just, knowing that storytelling is so important and positioning and messaging is such a huge part of product marketing. How do you approach positioning and messaging? What's your strategy there?
Yeah. So who's the target audience? What are they dealing with? What are their jobs to be done? What are their needs and pain points? Who are your competitors? Because no company or product exists in a vacuum. You need to understand that competitive landscape so you can see where the gaps and opportunities are for differentiation. What's your unique value? What makes you different? Why should customers choose you over everyone else? So why you? Why now? Why this? And then testing and refining that messaging, because messaging isn't static. It is a living organism. Messaging could work for you this year and then fail next year, either because there's a new competitor in the space or your customers have outgrown your product, right? So testing and refining your messaging continuously with your target audience, I think is very important.
Great. Well, this has been awesome. Do you have anything? We have a couple of minutes left. Anything that you want to end with, or any fun facts you want to share? Really, anything you want to share now?
Yeah, no, I think for me, it's more just curiosity around what you guys have been seeing, within the community. So you've been doing a bunch of these episodes so far. What's been, I guess, the biggest learning for you throughout the entire process?
It's really interesting actually to hear people's takes on the 30, 60, 90 days approach. For example, for you, you were sharing about execution in those last 30 days where like some people really talk about absorption being a sponge all the way through. So I think just hearing different takes on that has been really interesting for me. Ahil actually talked about, and you mentioned this a little bit too, but just as you're speaking to all of these different people within an organization, asking them the same questions to see where there's alignment in the answers, I thought that was brilliant. Like you start in a company, the first 30 days, you're interviewing sales, you're interviewing different people in marketing, different aspects of marketing, and then you're also talking to product. And so really being consistent with the questions that you're approaching them with, I think is such a great idea. And actually, okay, like where are we aligned? Where are people saying totally different things? What do people actually think about the product across the board? Like it's interesting to see that stuff come out internally, because I think you mentioned this too. People want to work for a company that they feel is winning. Like it gets everybody excited when they feel like, oh yeah, like everybody loves our product or we're doing really great things. And so uncovering maybe where people don't quite feel that way, where that might even be aligned to where customers are at as well, things that need to be changed or evolved. I think uncovering that is really, really interesting. And it also is grounding, because sometimes you work for a company, you totally drink the Kool-Aid. And because you're drinking the Kool-Aid, you don't actually give yourself an opportunity to really hear your customers or understand like what's not working. What are things that we can improve on? We actually had a client last year who they had developed positioning and messaging with their product team. They didn't interview customers. They had this very robust language around how they talked about their product, what the benefits were. Then we came in and we spoke to customers, and it was totally out of alignment with what they believed people would say. And it wasn't that customers were unhappy, but it was so simplified. Like ease of use was a benefit that their customers were saying. And it was really interesting to see how this team kind of balked at it. They were like, but ease of use is so simple. We want to say that our product does X, Y, and Z. Ease of use is, a benefit that every product has. And it's like, yeah, but this is what your customers are saying. So it's interesting to see sometimes how either internally we're disconnected because we're not having the same conversations with everybody to really understand this broader viewpoint, or just how, our internal viewpoint doesn't actually match what our customers are sharing.
I really like that point. People writing for someone they've never spoken to.
Oh
And
my
it's
God,
also
it's
amazing
crazy.
how it's amazing how little people actually talk to their customers. It's such a basic, simple thing, but it's almost
Totally.
as if like marketers, we're so non-confrontational. Like we don't want to talk to the person that we hope will give us
Right.
money in exchange for
Or
this
maybe we're
product.
afraid, we're afraid
Yeah,
of what they'll say,
yeah.
but yeah, this has been so great. Really, really great points. Love the tips. We're really excited to share this. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, thanks for being on PMM Perspectives.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hope
Cool.
we can chat again soon.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Mo.